And welcome back in, college hockey fans, to our season wrap-up episode here on MNCAA. Max Veech is back in the house. I'm back in Minneapolis. I'm Nick Maxson. My goodness, Max. Can we just start off by saying we called it? We're just going to put it that way. The NCHC has won yet another championship. That's 7 of the past 9 years, Max. And as one would say, it should have been 8 in the past 10. Bulldogs could have three-peated, probably would have three-peated. They've been in 8 of the past 10. The only 2 that they have not played in is it 9 of 10? Because St. Cloud State was in this national championship game with UMass. Yeah, the only one that was 2023 was Quinnipiac in Minnesota. So, the NCHC continues its dominance in the college hockey world despite 2 teams getting in. And, Max, I'm going to open with this. The NCHC usually is shall I say, would classify itself as a very classy organization, and I love that about them. They did a little bit of a different approach on the interwebs with their championship. I love that little subtle troll there amongst the down year. Did you see that? What was your initial reaction to that?
Yeah, first and foremost, you said we had everything right, and I would say that we absolutely did. I put my hand up enough this year saying how wrong I was about so many different things. It's my turn to say I was right, you were right, we as a collective were right. I feel like this NCHC post and attitude that they've taken after this, yet another championship is kind of bleeding over into my mentality here, where I'm just taking victory laps on everybody. But it's deserved at this point. Maybe not for me, but certainly for the conference. I mean, you went into the numbers there, and that's just as dominant of a run as you're going to see from any conference anywhere. And I posted about it. I think, historically, when people are like, oh, put, hockey in college football terms, and everyone would say, oh, they're the SEC of college hockey. And that's now, in my opinion, an insult to the NCHC, because they are so far above and beyond that.
Yep.
Dominance and winningness and recognition and everything that they get in terms of the championship caliber teams coming out of that conference, that there is nothing that you could compare them to. Maybe like, the Yankees run, if you wanted to compare it to one specific organization in the, late 90s, early 2000s, then I guess if you had to pick one, that would be close. The Patriots organization, during one of the up seasons of when Brady was there, but it's just comical almost, the type of success and talent that the NCHC has pushed out. And I mean, we've seen instant impacts already this year. We've seen one player that we wish would have seen an instant impact already, and I'm sure we'll get into that as well. But I couldn't be more proud of having my team be a part of this conference, be a part of that, winning tradition more recently. And I think it draws a lot of high caliber talent to a conference like the NCHC that, while we're talking about transfer portal and everything else, there's quite a few, and there's a lot of money behind why people are going to the Big Ten. But I would say from a winning and talent perspective, you're going to get a lot of people transferring to the NCHC for this reason specifically as well, where they might not if we weren't having this type of sustained success. So I'm loving it personally.
I am too. Like you said, it's not that you want to take the victory laps, but you almost have to when it's the down year, it's the doubters, it's the, whatever you want to phrase it as. I mean, this conference continues year after year to prove that it is the best conference in college hockey. You just don't have to look further than the regular season. And somehow people think Miami moving out of the NCHC is something they should do. Again, we've talked about it at length. This again proves why Miami as an institution would never think twice about leaving the NCHC on its own accord. There's just no way. But let's do this. Let's recap the Frozen Four. We'll start with the 2 semifinal games. The first one was the better matchup, a absolute classic between the 2 teams that saw themselves together not that long ago in the NCHC Frozen Faceoff Championship game. We're talking Denver, the reigning, now unfortunately for them, no longer the reigning national champions. They get in double overtime defeated by Western Michigan. A little bit different script though here, Max. It was 2-0 Broncos. It was Denver that claws back from a multi-goal deficit to tie it at 2. Again, the first overtime, it's, shall we say, conservative hockey. It's trying to make sure it's smart puck decisions. Second overtime comes out, and Western Michigan says, okay, we're done with this. Let's end this. Yeah. How about this for mirror images, Max? 26 seconds into the double overtime down in St. Louis. It was 22 seconds into double overtime in St. Paul. I mean, I don't know how, I mean, you can't write a script that poetic there for Western Michigan to take down the former champ. But again, we talked about it in our preview. We thought Western would be the one that comes out. We did say would be a close game. It was a really good game between these two squads. I'm sure you were watching. What were your thoughts on that first semifinal game?
Yeah, I mean, it was almost a carbon copy, but the bizarro world version of the NCHC championship game in their tournament as well. So I was like, oh no, is Denver kind of pulled this out in the same fashion that Western did? And it just took that second overtime for Western to come out and do what they did previously one more time. And I guess I was kind of waiting for it, but congratulations to Matt Davis on becoming one of the most successful playoff performance goalies in college hockey history, just in terms of getting wins when they probably shouldn't have. And they ran into a buzzsaw in Western Michigan that I don't know that, well, obviously nobody could kind of figure out or defeat, but it would have been impressive nonetheless to get that type of a win on his record. And it didn't come out his way this time around, but I have to tip my cap to him again, because he kept that Denver squad in that game through quite a few pretty tumultuous situations and really high scoring chance opportunities that Western had there. But yeah, incredible game. I think it was probably the best game of the weekend. Obviously, when you go into double overtime, it's going to kind of be a shoe-in for that. But even from a pace of play standpoint, yeah, they felt each other out a little bit to start with there. I don't think that either one was sending all of their guns, ablazing and not having any sort of reserve defense, just as a sign of respect for the talent that's on the other side of the ice there. And you kind of have to play that way. And like I said, I kind of felt that may play into Denver's hands in terms of the grinded out mentality, because Western has, so many more scorers and forward talent on their team, which is crazy to say when I'm talking about going against the leading point scorer in all of college hockey. But yeah, it's something that I enjoyed watching a hell of a lot. And, I was just waxing poetically about the NCHC and their results in the tournament. But every game that they're in was incredibly fun to watch, and having them play against each other here just showcased the talent of the conference incredibly well. It was unfortunate that the crowds were a little bit, lower for the first two games. One, I know what kind of goes into that is it's sold as a single ticket package for both games typically. And so if you're a fan of one, you don't go to the other one, and vice versa. And I think that middle period between, when overtime started for the Western game, when fans were arriving expecting the start of the BU game, it was significantly more full, and then it just kind of that was the peak of the parabola of the attendance at the arena there. So I wish there was a better turnout for those games, just because specifically this first one was so good. But anybody that did tune in to watch it or caught it at a later date, they were treated to something that you're not going to see in a lot of other conference hockey games or just playoff hockey games in general. And it just looked really, really good for the conference. And yeah, I think it set Western up really, really nicely for the next matchup, knowing that they were able to persevere through that one.
Would agree. I want to play a little bit of a soundbite here. Just a quick opening comments there from Pat Firschweiler after that semifinal win down in St. Louis again. Was able to be there in person again. Love going to these events. Let's hear a little bit from Pat Firschweiler.
Great battle. Obviously, Denver's has a championship pedigree, and they weren't going to, go down easy. So they pushed back in the third, but I thought our team responded with belief and execution in that overtime, and I thought we deserved it the win in the overtime.
Okay, awesome. Questions for the players in front there? No, we need the mic, please, and identify yourself and
Steve Overby, St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Just talk us through that play and the emotions.
Yeah, kind of blacked out a little bit. It was kind of a little bit of a broken play, and just kind of saw the puck squirt out to me, and was in the middle of the ice and had some open time and space, and just figured I'd put it on net, and pretty happy it went in.
That was Owen Michaels there, the eventual overtime winner, and we'll go on and we'll talk about his performance in the championship game and also some more accolades of him. But first, Weiler, a man of not many words, but a man of, shall we say, pointed words. And I think he summed it up nice. You know, a good push there by Denver in the third. Denver, I mean, if you saw the shot totals, Max, after 40 minutes, this game was lopsided, very lopsided in favor of Western Michigan. But as everybody who knows this Denver Pioneer squad, any team that's coached by David Carl, you can never count out the Pioneers, even though all the analytics, all the statistics say they're being heavily outgunned. They found a way to push it to overtime. And again, a broken play. In fact, Zeev Boyum was one that broke up that initial pass going towards the right side. It lays in a dangerous area, and Michaels just unloads on it, a quick release. And not too many goaltenders are going to stop that shot. Matt Davis did not. And that sent Western Michigan into the Frozen Four championship game. Again, just a classic. And just hearing it from Firstwhile there, too. I'm just curious to know your response. I know short amount of words, but I think, again, it just speaks to just sort of the mindset of Western Michigan. And they were just on a mission. They took care of business on Thursday.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've seen and heard no fewer than half a dozen Firstwhiler interviews over the last probably week, maybe week and a half here. And every one of them, I'm just like, I don't want to like this guy because he's a conference. I don't even know if you would consider it rival, but you know, he plays in or he coaches for a team in my same conference. But it's hard not to like the guy and his approach to the hockey game. I think they talked about it at the beginning of the broadcast there, where it was a ties optional affair, and that was more to keep, you know, everybody on the coaching staff and the players that were, you know, around them comfortable and felt like it was just any other game that they were going into. And you kind of heard that from Alex Bump and some of the other players when they were doing post-game interviews, like, we treated this like every other game, or tried to at the very least. And that's the you know, vibe that they were putting off to everybody. And it goes to show you that if that's how you're going to do it, and you don't change to try and fight your opponent, you just play your game, and you're strong enough to do it, you have enough talent like Western did, then it's going to probably work out pretty well for you. So yeah, hard not to like a guy like Firsch. I wish that he would, you know, stick around and maybe come on home to Minnesota and coach one of the schools around here. But hard. I would imagine it would be hard to get a guy like that away from a program like Western Michigan, being an alumni and, you know, having the success that he had this year there, with the promise of, you know, new facilities and all sorts of talent coming in there in the future as well. But a guy can hope.
Yeah. He did mention that, Max, during another, I think partly in that press conference. He talked about how, you know, his initial goal, or how he wants to set up the program is, we want to create something that players want to come to, right? I know something that's been swirling quite a bit through this, you know, run that Western Michigan's been on, and we can get into probably this more in the offseason. But again, we talk about the transfer portal, the NIL money, and sort of the damage that we as fans are perceiving that to be done, especially when it seems like a particular conference, the Big Ten, seems to be pushing more and more dollars towards, shall we say, luring players from other squads, right? And I get it. It's going to happen. We figured at some point, we were warned about this, some writers, from coaches, from the competition committee, that this may cause a rift amongst the college hockey circles. I think we're starting to kind of see that. But Schlossman comes out and says, hey, Western Michigan won this thing with not a single cent of NIL money, right? Max, I guess the question I have for you is, does that make their Frozen Four championship that much more improbable or more impressive?
Ooh, if I had to pick one, impressive. The only reason I don't go improbable is they've been a perennial contender, at least in making it to the NCAA tournament over the last, you know, handful of seasons here. So for that reason alone is why I would go with impressive over improbable when we're breaking it down to lack of impact from the NIL contributions for other teams there. And I mean, we see teams like Michigan who didn't make the tournament, who have maybe the largest, if not one of the largest NIL budgets, if not this year, for sure going forward. So yeah, it goes to show you that it's not all about the guys that are getting paid the most because of the most talented or what have you. It's about a team first mentality. Western Michigan certainly had that based on everything that I've seen, and having seen UMD play against them a number of times this year. And it's you can win with talent. It's going to be proven that in the future somebody is going to win with talent alone. But I would say that more often than not, you're going to need a little bit more than that, and you can win. This proves. With more of a team or a program first mentality as well. And I think guys are going to want to play for that coach more, because we've seen it in college football specifically this year, a number of the storylines where if a guy's there for money and money alone, there's going to be somebody else that pays more maybe the next season, or he's not going to work as hard or put himself, at risk of injury, or, put in the extra work to make himself better, or what have you. It's just a little bit different mentality. And as somebody who, grew up as a middle-class kid trying to work more and hasn't really had much handed to himself, has been working since he's 12. It's like, I respect that a heck of a lot more. And I wouldn't turn down, UMD forking over a little bit of money for somebody, but that's not the way that they're going to move their program forward either. So it's a mutual respect and a common or shared approach that I think that I would have with Firstweiler, Western Michigan, and how they're kind of building their team there. So yeah, credit to them.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that 100%. Credit to them. And again, they've got a brand new barn coming. It says that they've essentially started to move the dirt. The opening slated for 2027-28 season. So another 2 years at now. It is Lawson Arena, right? The Lunatics were going loony down there in St. Louis.
They were.
Yes. And we'll talk more about the impact they had, I think, on that championship game. But Max, we have one more semifinal matchup that we have to cover. That is Boston University and Penn State. And again, it's like we know what we're talking about, right? It's like, okay, there are a ton of people thought BU was going to steamroll Penn State. I said, no way. This is a lot closer of a matchup than it will look like on paper. And that's what ended up being a 3-1 victory for Boston over Penn State. And one was an empty netter. So this really was a 1-goal game, Max. I want to ask you a question, though, because I did tweet out a photo while I was in St. Louis. The ice conditions did not look great. Now, granted, both teams are playing in the same ice surface. Both teams have to weather that adversity, right? Now, I do feel, because of the way Penn State plays, which is an up-tempo, speed, sort of transitional style, that it can affect a team who plays that sort of structure a bit more. And I do feel like both teams, especially after a double overtime performance by the two teams prior, that really did kind of change the complexion of that game. Did you get that sense as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, specifically at the start of the game, even on a fresh sheet, we were seeing the puck bounce around quite a bit more. I think it was on the near boards towards the camera side there, where guys seemed to have a little bit more trouble just getting a handle on it. And it was just on edge quite a bit more than we'd seen in previous games out of Penn State or BU. So I think the nature in which Penn State had won most of their games going into this and become a hot team was affected maybe a little bit more out of this situation when you're going up boards and dragging a puck at your hip or something like that, and you don't have two hands full control and everything else. It's a heck of a lot easier for that to become dislodged or come off your stick or what have you. And I think we did see that one or two more opportunities there, and maybe that would be the difference for Penn State and some of the high percentage shooters that they've got, whether it's Serrato or Fink or somebody else. But do I think that anybody should be blaming it on that? No, but I would say that there is a potential that it could have, changed at least one or two plays during the game. And I think it probably would have favored Penn State just a little bit more in that one. And I don't mean for that to take away from anything that BU did, because we saw the big name players that we expected kind of show up for them early. When we're talking about Jack Hughes and Cole Iserman getting those first 2 goals, Cole Hudson being an absolute menace. I think he got one of the assists on those as well. And so those are the names that you expect to hear. And Yegorov was incredible for them as well. I think he made a couple of grade A stops and from Penn State in those first couple of periods. But it was an even game. The people that thought BU was going to take it and steamroll them, as you put it, were proven to be completely wrong. I think nobody was comfortable with that lead. 0 goals in the first period. Hard fought second, where the goals were quite a bit apart. Nobody got a ton of steam. BU wasn't able to do what they did against Ohio State in terms of getting a ton of momentum and kind of breaking the will of their opponent there. I think Penn State did the best thing that they could and scored early in that third period and kind of put them back on their heels until the very end when they had to pull the goalie. But yeah, it was another fun game to watch. I think shots were completely even at the end of the game there, which goes to show you that maybe we some other people underestimated Penn State from a competitiveness perspective there. And they're going to look a little bit different going into next year. So it's hard to say that, they're for sure a contender to make it back to a Frozen Four. But, for what they did this year, it was incredible.
Yeah, and I will tell you, after the conclusion of that game, we were up in the press box after both press conferences, trying to just wrap up what for me ended up being a 21.5-hour day. I'll tell you, I was feeling it the next day. My goodness gracious. But their fans had stuck around, and there was I believe Penn State media was doing some things with a pretty large fan group in the crowd there. It's still in the arena post hours. They had some players come out. You could tell that this meant something to that program, which I like to see as a fan, right? Now, granted, they got to St. Louis, they didn't win a game, but we talk about how getting to a Frozen Four can sometimes be a springboard to how your program can do. Now, we've seen reports that says that Penn State has quote unquote a treasure trove or a treasure chest of resources they are essentially ready to unlock. And I'm assuming that means money for NIL, right? I think that's kind of where they're going with this. But when you have success like this, making it to a Frozen Four off of, shall we say it on a conference that there were plenty of other names that I think most people would have put ahead of them. This is a good way to, shall we say, if you are a donor or if you're a booster club and you're looking for a reason to push you into, shall we say, committing financially, one way to do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're a person who just wants your program, as in your university, to have national headlines and see championships or whatever, hockey is an untapped ground for putting that money into. I think, we've seen it in the past where booster programs and everything have been paying other sports significant amounts of money, whether it's 2 players under the table or through training or advertising or whatever directly. We haven't seen that money impact hockey very much to date. I think we will see it significantly moving forward. We've already started to see it a little bit with the NIL and transfers and the amount of players that are going to one of those larger, Big Ten universities from some of these other programs. I would love to see, Schlossman or Sydney or anybody else that does one of the transfer portal trackers go through and see how many total points went to each conference via the transfer portal. Because if I had to put my money on it, I would say the points going to Big Ten would trump the next highest conference in there, maybe by double. I think, Hockey East might see a little bit more of a bump just being on that East Coast, close to some of those other ACHA schools or ECAC schools. But I from what I've noticed so far, anyway, it's pretty black and white in terms of where the trails are leading at this point, anyway. So. Booster clubs, if you want your program, your university to win a national championship, put money into the hockey program. And I don't want that message to get out too much, because I know that there's going to be significantly more other programs that can do it more than UMD. But I feel like it's going to be said. So I'm just going to kind of feed into it because it will ultimately be good for college hockey to have more eyes on it. And that's what's going to happen if people have money invested in it.
100%, which means I'll tell you where the eyes were on Saturday. That was the national championship game. We'll talk about, actually, you know what, before we do that, Hobie Baker Award and the Richter Award, because that was Friday. They're at the Stiefel Theater, which strangely enough is quite literally attached to Scott Trade Center down there in St. Louis. Really? Yes. It was essentially same compound. Granted, they're two separate buildings, but I mean, they are joined essentially. It's kind of a goofy spot, but beautiful venue. Again, an hour-long presentation to something that I think was a necessary and actually a really good change. I know that in years past, I've done a very quick half-hour program that felt condensed, that felt rushed. I do like how this was produced there by ESPN. I'll just leave it at that. What I did not like, and I think we're going to agree with this, is maybe some of the picks. And maybe when I say did I like, maybe not necessarily agree is what I should say. The first award they did announce was the Richter Award. And Max, we talked about it. We said the numbers said this is Alex Tracy. But then we also said, hey, if there's one issue with Tracy from the eyes of the voters, right, is that it could be that he's in the CCHA. Despite his performance in the regional final, which should have doubted, put in any naysayers down. It went to Jacob Fowler. And again, is Jacob Fowler deserving of the award? Yeah. Do I think Alex Tracy should have been the award winner? I think you can make an argument that he had better numbers that would have been a better representation of that award. Max, I wanted to grab your take on Jacob Fowler being this year's Mike Richter Award recipient.
Maybe you can give me a little bit more insight as to when the voting for this ends, because I think we've seen it in the past where a really good or a really strong opening round regional weekend seems to have an impact on whether it's the Hobie Baker or Mike Richter, whichever the winner is being announced. So are those votes cast prior to that regional weekend, or can you still vote for the smaller committee that's doing it at that point following those regional games?
That's a great question. I'm actually double checking that as we speak.
Because where I'm going with that is I really think that, had Minnesota State been able to match up with anybody but Western, he would have been able to prove that it's not a fluke. These numbers are, legitimate against no matter who we're playing. And they did that against Western because I think he posed the most trouble for the Western scorers and everything else in terms of how he played in their game against them. But the fact that you only got to see him for one game and they lost that game probably didn't make a big enough impact on the people that were voting there. I think that it maybe opened their eyes a little bit and opened their opinion of, maybe, we could do this if I saw a little bit more, and they just didn't get the opportunity to see more. So if they make it to, the Frozen Four for sure, but even to that next game, and he had two big games against two high caliber, opponents there, maybe he does win that award, because it would kind of shut up a lot of the people, myself included, a couple of weeks ago, that were saying that it's, a unfair comparison when you're talking about who he was playing versus who some of these other people were playing, because once you've done it against those other teams, it's hard to refute it.
So I found something on College Hockey News that says that there's a combination of fan votes, media, coaches, and scouts. But I am having a difficult time finding essentially when the voting closes. So I'm going to do a little bit more digging on that.
If it's anything like the Hobie Baker, the fan vote, as much as they push it and everything, it's 1% of your overall impact in terms of who the Hobie Baker winner ultimately is. And then once it gets passed where the fans are even voting on it, it goes to committee only to make the final decision on it. So, yes, there is an impact, a little bit, or potential impact in that fan vote. And they do get to see that thought, so that, if they're 50-50 on a player, they can go with, the more the fan side or one way or the other to impact their own vote, which has a lot more weight behind it, but I don't know if that's for sure what goes on with the Richter as well. I've looked into and seen a lot more on the Hobie than I have for the Richter. So yeah, I would be interested to see how that turns out in the future, because I would say more often than not, a long, deep playoff run has yielded significantly more votes for some of these winners, whether it be Hobie Baker or Mike Richter in the past.
Right. We'll do some more digging on that, and that would be maybe a good off-season episode as to maybe the Richter and the Hobie, and maybe more of the vote breakdowns, and maybe how let's just say this. And I know that our colleague Ryan Stieg has been on those committees before, so he'd be a good resource to tap into that as well. Yeah. Which means with the Richter, and then there was a couple of other awards, a humanitarian award that went to True Scott there of Michigan. Well deserved on that one. I don't think we need to spend too much time on that. Just it speaks for itself. It's a wonderful award. I'm glad that they kind of do this award. I know it's Josh Lidke for St. Cloud was an initial finalist for the award. Very, very cool to see, even just those initial finalists announced for that award, just because of the different stories, the different causes that each of these players that does support. So that's always a cool thing to kind of watch. But the Hobie Baker Award, right? It came down to 3: Zeev Buium, it came down to Ryan Leonard, and to Isaac Howard. And just simply put here, Max, I think Bucci's tone of voice kind of said it. This was a bit of a surprise pick. It went to Isaac Howard of Michigan State. Now, granted, heck of a season for Isaac Howard, right? Led the nation in scoring on a very good Michigan State team. And at the end of the day, he got the votes. A lot of this is where one I think we got wrong, Max. I think we thought that maybe this is Ryan Leonard's, to essentially shoot in. And granted, he had a very decorated collegiate career. In fact, just after his team was eliminated from postseason contention of the NCAA, Ryan Leonard is on the same sheet of ice where Ovechkin passes Wayne Gretzky for the most goals in an NHL career, 895. He actually puts in an empty netter in that same game. So he gets his first NHL goal and does it in the same night. Ovechkin breaks a record that nobody thought could be broken, but it isn't his. It goes to Isaac Howard. Max, were you just as surprised as it sounded like John Buccigross was when he announced the pick?
Honestly, yeah. Based on everything that I had seen going into this vote or this presentation ceremony, is that this was Ryan Leonard to lose here. And it's not a competition where anybody can lose it, but it's not like Isaac Howard outshined them in that first round. When we go back to that same conversation we were having about the goaltenders, Leonard made it to a second game, Howard did not. And it was, Howard had a significantly better overall season. There was a couple of points where it was a little bit more streaky than others, but yes, he had a good production total, but I would say from an impact on your team, Ryan Leonard probably had that going away. So that was kind of crazy. There was a little part of me that's, the homer side anyway, that thought that Zeev Buium could have an outside shot at it. I know that they have given it to, impact defenseman Cale Makar being, the most notable probably of the recent past. That could win that award. I've been on record as saying he's the most NHL ready out of everybody that was on the nomination list to start with, which is, again, I referenced it a little bit before, and we'll probably talk about it a little bit here later. Funny that he didn't make the starting lineup when he was available to in the Wild's last game here.
I get it. We'll talk about it later, but I get
against
it.
Anaheim. But yeah, it's something that I didn't know for sure. I wasn't overly surprised, obviously, with only 3 people being able to win it, seeing Isaac Howard's name, but it certainly wasn't the one that I was expecting when it came up there. So the one thing I'll say about it, and I joke about this online, and I'm only half joking about it when I say it now, it's another Bulldog alum. If we're getting technical, it's another Bulldog alum that has won the Hobie Baker Award. So if we're going to count it as 6 1/3 here, so be it. Maybe 6 1/4 because it sounds like he's coming back next year. But if by the letter of the law, in terms of what an alum is, he fits that. So I'm going to count it personally. Nobody else has to, but that's how I'm going to see it in my history books.
Yeah, a little surprised at Isaac Howard. It sounds like the negotiations with the Tampa Bay Lightning didn't go either one of the sides' way, and that's surprising to me because Julian Brisebois and the Tampa Bay Lightning, if you read The Athletic, were tops in terms of the organization's rankings in the league. This is by executives, by agents, by players themselves as GMs to work with, organizations that you want to play for. They got the best coach in the league, in my opinion, in John Cooper. So I don't know how that fell through, but at the end of the day, that could also be, shall we say, you can always change your mind. Just ask a former Gopher player. We'll leave it at that. So
Yeah,
you can always
I have no impact or insight into what was going on there. Just based on what I've seen out of Tampa Bay's team structure, I don't know that he would be able to fit in right away. And if he's not able to burn that first year of his contract in, a wasted couple of games here, and wouldn't be obviously guaranteed a position on a playoff team or anything like that, and, would be stuck somewhere he didn't want to be, I guess that would make sense to kind of sit out and wait. And he becomes an unrestricted free agent now that he's unsigned by August, right?
No. So so you get 4 years.
Okay.
So he would be a free agent by August 15th of next summer, if I remember correctly.
Next summer. Okay.
So I think he's still under Tampa Bay control until that time. I'm going to double check this as we go through that, but I remember from my old cap friendly days that if you were a college, you got the 4 years basically to allow their NCAA eligibility. And then once that ended, that's when the deadline to sign was. So if that's the case, then yeah, there shouldn't be any panic. I think from either side. I totally agree with you that if you're, shall we say, looking at it from the position of Isaac Howard, I mean, there's no really rush at all, in my opinion. And at the end of the day, if you're going to want to jump into the NHL right away, and I think Isaac Howard has the belief that he belongs in the NHL, not the AHL. If it isn't right now, then it isn't. And I did confirm, yes, August 15th of next year is the deadline to get him signed. So yes, I was correct on that. So I'm not too concerned. I think they'll figure it out one way or the other. I do think now they'll just kind of wait to see. I mean, he could have a mind change during the summertime, depending on what Tampa does with, the free agency, with the draft. You just never know. Tampa also very good at wheeling and dealing, as we know. They've had a really good second half surge post trade deadline, and we're going to get to see one heck of a first round in the Battle of Florida. That's going to be entertaining hockey, just as was the national championship game, Max. We do have to cover that last. We'll put it through this way. When the semifinal number 2 ended and we heard from Jay Pandolfo, he was asked a question, Max, about, first of all, you're going to enjoy this, but, have you done any sort of work or pre-scouting on Western Michigan? And let's just say it this way. His response, Max, was, I have. And he didn't say it verbatim, but he definitely communicated that this was going to be a tough battle. So they knew the beast that they were going up against. And that's exactly what it was, because Western jumped out to an early 1-0 lead. Western never gave up a lead in this game. And to me, the turning point was Owen Michaels again, extending the lead to 4-2. It was within a 1-goal game. That's as close as Boston ever got. It was never tied. And then 2 empty netters late, sealing the Broncos' fate. Heck of a performance there from Western Michigan. And more impressively here, Max, if we go back to the regionals and then throughout the Frozen Four, not many points, if any, from Alex Bump, but the depth of this squad showed that it did not matter. Western Michigan are your 2025 college hockey national champs.
Yeah, it was a sight to see for sure. I think the overall viewership ratings came out just after, or just a couple of days ago here now. and it was up 30% from last year and the highest since 2018, which UMD had played in, if I need to remind anybody. And once, but it always seems to get a little bit of a jump there, and rightfully so, when it's a team going for their first national championship or competing, for their first national championship, let alone winning it. So seeing that, I would say, played a significant part in that as well. I think, you were at the arena, you can kind of speak to the atmosphere there, but everything that I saw was very heavily weighted from a rooting interest in Western Michigan. Is that what you experienced in the arena?
Even for warm-ups, there were, shall I say, boo birds coming down for Boston, and the Western Michigan cheers were plentiful. And in his post-game presser, First Weather kind of said the quiet part out loud. He kind of said it felt like a home game. He really, really did. And honestly, from my experience, it did feel that way. You did get the sense that, St. Louis, a very blue collar type of community, really sort of jumped on the bandwagon of Western Michigan. They were America's team on that night, at least inside the Scott Trade Center. Enterprise Center, right? Or is it Scott Trade? I can't remember. Anyway, it's building names change. The XL Energy is going to change its name for next season. I can't keep it all straight, man. I'm getting old. But at the end of the day, it was very electric in there for anything Western Michigan did. Also very loud, shall we say, not so happy with certain plays there, I guess, at Boston University. But overall vibe, Max, numbers weren't jumping off the page that this was a dominant Western Michigan victory. I still feel like if you really break it down, a pretty even game, really. But what Western Michigan does and had done this season so much better than any other team was when they get a lead, minus the Frozen the Frozen Faceoff Championship, they don't usually give it up, right? So at the end of the day, that 4-2, you could feel the shift, the ice tilting at that point. You could see Boston knew that could have been the nail in the coffin, end up being that exact thing. So, Max, I'm sure you caught the game. I just kind of want to know your thoughts on a championship performance there for the Broncos. And again, taking home their first ever, which is always super cool to see, but also adding another trophy for the NCHC conference again.
Yeah, you mentioned it, coming out to a really fast start and hearing the roar of the crowd and it being, noticeable via the TV cameras and the broadcast as well, had to put a little bit of a pep in the step of anybody on the Western Michigan bench there. If you score in under 2 minutes, it automatically makes you feel good, especially when you can hold them off for, another 5 minutes before you get any sort of a response. And then, they score again before the end of the period. And I don't know that it ever felt that close again. And on the scoreboard, it never was that close again. So I would say it was a cool, semi-historic game in terms of two rookie goalies brought both of these freshman goalies rookie. I don't know why people switch between those two, but two first-year goaltenders brought both of these teams to the championship game there. One of them only playing, 20 games for BU in Yegorov down the stretch there before making it to the tournament. And it was impressive on both sides. I think, they were both difference makers to make it to that game and in that game as well. I think, Yegorov kept the Terriers within striking distance despite the fact that it ended at 6-2. I think it could have been a heck of a lot worse with some of the opportunities that Western had there. And Slukinski, I feel like I need to defend him a little bit. Yeah, he quote unquote gave up 2 goals, but one was dug out from underneath his pad and put back in, and one felt like it was pushed in from underneath him as he was quote unquote already falling over, which I vehemently disagreed with. And then there was almost a third goal called on a very, very similar one. So yeah, BU was not getting the goals that they had seen, throughout the rest of the tournament, where it was the broadcasters waxing poetically about them, creatively shooting it from below the goal line, off of the back of the goalie, or, from the outside and sneaking in the corner. They were getting those dirty, garbage, if you will, goals where it's just a scrum in front of the net. And some teams are built that way. It doesn't seem like they were built that way this year. And if that's how they needed to get them, they were finding a way to do that. And I do want to give them credit for, battling it out and finding a way that's outside of their comfort zone. But I think it could have been, if there was a little bit quicker whistle, I think it could have been an even more lopsided score at the end of the game there. But that's all to say that, I think BU battled hard. They just weren't able to find any sort of the same space or results due to that space that they were against anybody else. And that speaks to the structure that WMU, Western Michigan, played with. And it was impressive from start to finish. Yes, the numbers looked a lot closer than the game felt, but anybody that watched that game knew, especially after that first period, that this was Western's game to lose. And they took it over and saw it to the end.
That they did. And Max, I want to say this. They, in a post-game presser after a let's just say a very joyous celebration there for Western Michigan on the ice, was cool to be on that same ice surface with the team after they lifted the trophy. But they asked Hampton-Slukinski about tonight's game, or I should say that game, in the sense of, it just didn't feel off, or, it just because on one hand, yes, slow whistles. Yeah, that was something I think everybody in the country noticed with the ECAC crew. Normally, those whistles are very early, right? As soon as the goaltender feels it. Number two, you talk about, and this has been reported on with Hampton-Slukinski throughout the entire season, is doesn't really get bothered by anything, right? And his answer to that question, he kind of echoed that. He said, it's, you like to have a cleaner stop, or, you like to not have essentially the play turn into where, I'm digging for, or I'm trying to double check to make sure I have it secure in my glove. Because I think it was that potential third goal that you were mentioning, Max, it was in his glove, and then it kind of slipped out a little bit, and it was underneath. There's a pile of traffic in and around his crease. It ended up going to review. It never went in, but I think he was referring to, like, hey, that's hockey sometimes. Like, you're not going to make every perfect save, but the puck stayed out. And when he needed to make the biggest saves, I know Boston had a pretty good push there in the last, between the 10-minute mark and then probably the 6-minute mark left in the third. There were a couple of good rush chances that they had. They were trying to stretch the ice a little bit, just trying to find something to get back within one. He made a couple of really good dandy saves there to keep Western Michigan's 2-goal lead there. So to me, as much as Owen Michaels, who did win most outstanding player in the Frozen Four tournament, and also well-deserved, that is one heck of a player that Western Michigan has. You can't forget, I should say, Hampton-Slukinski. And although maybe he didn't have his best night, if you want to call it from a tactical standpoint of goaltending, he was there in the biggest moments when Western Michigan needed it to help them secure their first ever title.
100%. Yeah. I think, you mentioned it. It's been talked about over and over again. He seems unfazed by anything that's going on. And maybe that's from a comfortability with his brother on the ice and just having that sense of grounding there. I know there was a story that came out about his parents making whatever it is from Warroad all the way over to Kalamazoo, a 14-15 hour drive every weekend that they had a home game, and going all over the country to kind of support him in this first year there. And that may play a part in it. I don't want to say that those are entirely what it is, but whatever is happening and working for him, I hope it continues for the rest of his career, because it's a heck of a start. Being on the World Junior team and being a consideration for that gold medal game. Granted, Trey Augustine ended up getting the start there, but winning a national championship in that same year as a rookie, freshman, whatever you want to call it, it's going to be a career that a lot of people are willing or wanting to follow. And makes me think a little bit, and it was touched on by the broadcast a few times and by us in group chats and whatever else, what that Northern Michigan team might have looked like had Potulny stuck around and not had a mass exodus. And both the Slukinskis, Grant stayed there and Hampton ended up going and playing there. Western still had Cameron Rowe, and I think he was a good goaltender in his own right. But maybe we're looking at some different champion, and we'll never know. And that's kind of the beauty of sports in general. But there's a lot of people that are probably fans of Northern Michigan, like, man, look what we almost had. And I feel a little bit bad for them right now, but I'm gonna enjoy it while I can, just because it's a great family. They were featured in the War Road Hockey Day Minnesota when it was going on up there. I think both Grant and Hampton were on the ice as a part of that feature as well. So they've been at the forefront of hockey, both in Minnesota and at the national level for a while, and it seems like they're comfortable being there.
I want to give actually a shout out to Cam Rowe on this, because a story came out during the Frozen Four of when shall I say there was that exodus again from Northern Michigan, and then it was essentially confirmed that Hampton Slukinski was coming over to Western Michigan, and we know Cam Rowe has been very, very good for Western Michigan during his tenure there. I got a chance to speak with him at Media Day. Great kid. Just signed with Rockford here just a couple of days ago, if not today. So he's getting a pro shot. So good for Cam Rowe. But how he handled that situation is what I want to touch on. And this is coming from Pat Firschweiler. Essentially, the conversation took place that he was committed to Western Michigan. And Max, you and I, well as I know, that when the coach probably knows the players, they're already, probably texting the Instagram or other social media outlets that, things are, kind of rolling in that direction. So they probably know, if not sooner than the coach knows. And essentially, Firschweiler said, I was scared to call Cameron Rowe to say that this was happening, because inherently, I think, they knew the type of goaltender they were getting in Hampton Slukinski, who, again, a 4th round pick of the LA Kings. And essentially, before Firschweiler even kind of, got to what he was going to say, when they ended up calling each other, Cam Rowe said, hey, coach, I heard Hampton's going to come over. Can you give me his phone number? I'd like to call him and welcome him to the team. And from right then and there, you talk about this in all levels of hockey, but you don't really hear a story like this at the college ranks, because again, every player's trying to make an impact. They're trying to make a name for themselves. But what class and what maturity shown by Cameron Rowe. So I got to, I can tip my cap to that. Wish him the best in his pro career, because you don't normally see that a guy who was their starter for a couple of years straight, knowing that it likely was just taken from him to handle it with that type of class.
Yeah. I think that goes to speak to what we were talking about earlier in terms of a team first mentality and what they've built in Western Michigan there. And they split duties to start the season and well past that holiday break, I believe, in terms of who was getting the start, whether it was one after another each night or one after another each weekend. And eventually it kind of gave way to, we're going to go with one guy until he messes up. And Slukinski got that chance and just didn't mess up. And it sounds like Cameron Rowe was supportive of that. And that's what's going to make you a championship team. Yeah, having that competition and pushing you makes you be a little bit better. And maybe that helps Slukinski develop a little bit faster than others. But having a guy be supportive instead of competitive at the very end there can be just as much of a benefit. And it seems like Slukinski got that out of Rowe. And I would, echo everything that you said about Rowe's character and how we're happy for him and the opportunity that he's going to get in Rockford there.
Yeah, so very much. So many storylines there with this Western Michigan squad. We could be here for days breaking them all down. But again, congratulations to Western Michigan on their first ever program national championship. Just unbelievable run. I think I saw a tidbit that said that they had not lost 10 games. Oh, no, yeah, they won 10 games in a row to win the championship. The last time they lost in regulation was back in either February or January. Like, they went on a tear to win it. So, I mean, you talk about a team that was, I don't know if a team of destiny is the right word, but they certainly played like it. Just unbelievable. Our last topic here, Max, we talk about teams of destiny. This is an interesting tidbit that I wanted to share with you and get your thoughts on. So we talked a couple weeks ago about the coaching change at North Dakota, right? And how we both said that this feels weird. Now, granted, when we say weird, again, the guy never had a losing season. Granted, we understand that he didn't have, shall we say, the postseason success, and I get that. But it's so hard in college hockey to have repeat year after year contenders, and especially in the NCHC, right? Something that this is more of a rumor than it is anything. But I do feel like there's some traction to this. It sounds like that with the NIL money, right, that's going around college hockey in general. I think what has been shared, at least with me, is that the perception that North Dakota has, shall I say, Big Ten money is actually quite a bit off. And it sounds like that, shall I say, the Ralph Engelstad Foundation, that really is probably their biggest donor, from what I'm hearing, isn't dishing out as much money as it used to. Now, I don't know if that now, and here's where I don't know, right? And maybe someone's got to come at me with more details on this. I don't know if this is by choice. I don't know if this is sort of like the trust fund is running out kind of thing, right? Where this is like one of those Van Wilder type things. I don't know. But when you hear this and then you put the pieces together with Brad Berry, right, in his relief of his coaching duties, we talked about this too, where winning pretty much solves a lot of problems in sports, right? And if you're not, well, like, for lack of a better phrase, it sometimes creates more problems, right? And I do think this is the question I'm going to ask you. Is it very, very possible that North Dakota and its legacy, and this is probably from their own words, right, where they've got the best building, they've got the best, shall we say, player experience. We're talking, medical treatment, spas, all the bells and whistles with Ralph Engelstad Arena, which we've talked about. Great spot for college hockey, right? But we also just touched on Western Michigan, brand new building. Ed Robeson down in CC, brand new building. They're not the only diamond in the sand anymore, right? And I think if I'm putting the tea leaves together, the picture that I'm painting is North Dakota sees that too. And I think their concern is, well, we don't have Big Ten money. We don't have the resources that these other full Division I schools have. And the only way that we're going to, probably one, keep our legacy as a program, or two, try to build off of, is we need to win and we need playoff success. Is that a pipe dream analysis, or am I onto something there?
I would say there's a potential that you're certainly onto something there. The financials have always been a bit odd to me for the Ralph Engelstad Arena specifically, but the North Dakota hockey branch as a whole there. I know having gone D1 for their other sports puts them in a different category in terms of money that they need to spend or have to spend in certain other areas as well to meet the NCAA qualifications for facilities and everything else that goes into being a part of a D1 program at multiple levels. But for the hockey program specifically, they do have quite a bit more fan turnout on a week in and week out basis, a larger capacity for fans. And so that's going to give them enough, revenue to operate at a higher level than, we'll just say 70% of other universities. But yeah, I would say that the donors are going to be significantly less, on a person by person basis than most of those Big Ten ones, just because the, alumni base is so much smaller, one, but two, there's not that there's less wealthy people, but there are less, wealthy people donating as well, fewer, I should say, to the university's sports programs as well. And if you're saying that, maybe they're not getting as much from their cash cow, for lack of a better term, that they have in the past, that bites a little bit more than it does for a lot of the other universities. So you bring up a good point in terms of all of the other parts of college hockey, maybe getting a little bit more up to snuff or surpassing them in terms of the amenities that they're able to offer. I think that we've seen over the past couple of weeks and months here a few feature videos where they're going through some of these other facilities at Big Ten campuses and other campuses in general that do rival or exceed what North Dakota has there. So if they don't have the best arena and the best facilities and the best fan base unequivocally throughout, and you start getting a little bit more competition there, North Dakota might not look as appealing as somewhere, let's say, downtown, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a quote unquote fun metropolitan area that one of these Big Ten schools would be in. Happy Valley is in its own little world up there. Not to say that community is not good, but it's far away from everything else, and you're kind of in your own bubble. Ohio State, I guess, is fun. Minnesota's campus is big and close to the metro area.
BCBU.
BC and BU, yeah, you're right in big city there. Chestnut Hill. There's going to be some people arguing with me about it actually being in Boston or not, but it is. It's small enough out there. Yes. So yeah, I think that goes to your point of, yeah, maybe the allure of North Dakota isn't what it used to be, despite the fact that they are still one of the best. It's just not, hands down, quote unquote, the best unequivocally. So. That competition makes it a little bit more difficult, and I think that they are nervous for losing that allure if they don't find a way to have that postseason success in short order.
Right, and again, as we kind of continue to talk about the impact NIL has, it's about the recruiting at the end of the day too, right? And recruiting is a two-sided affair, right? It's recruiting your newer players, and just the way that this environment is playing out, Max, you're almost recruiting every year to keep the players that you get, right? So,
right.
I mean, there's been reports out there that said that if Dane Jackson wasn't the head coach, we could have seen a lot more players enter the portal than we have seen. Granted, they've already lost Sasha Boisvert. He's headed to Boston University. They've lost Jaden Perron. Again, another really good player there for North Dakota. So it's already going to look different. But you just kind of get the sense that, North Dakota finds himself, and I think in a position I don't think it ever thought it would ever be in, right? Which is, I think they thought that they would have just sort of a juggernaut status on recruiting and not necessarily championships. I think realistically they knew that was impossible. But with so many other, shall we say, teams that are up to par and, as you mentioned, perhaps beyond where they're at, I think they're looking in the mirror a little bit, and I think they're a little worried about where they're at. And I think, and I think to kind of wrap a bow on this last topic, is it fair to Brad Berry? I don't know if it really is, right? And I think at the end of the day, does that mean he is exempt from any and all blame? No. I mean, sure, right? There was certainly some things that when you go back 2 years ago and his entire starting defensive core hits the portal. Actually, I think his staff did a pretty good job of rebuilding that in the fly. I actually thought they did a really good job of that. But I wonder if that's where maybe there was cracks in the armor that maybe told us more was going on behind the scenes and we just didn't put that together. I almost get the sense that with this little nugget that we perhaps, again, I have no way to confirm this and covered, you put a couple of things together. Does this spell further danger to programs like St. Cloud State, UMD, these smaller schools, which again don't have even the resources that North Dakota has, and yet we're all in the same swimming pool trying to gather and fish for the same species to try to put on the dinner table? Is that? I mean, to me, it's definitely more damning to those programs than it is anything else.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair concern to have. The detractors or people on the other side of the argument are going to say there's a finite number of spots at those other universities, and on an even smaller scale, there's a finite number of spots that are actually seeing playing time. I would say more often than not, especially at a Michigan or Penn State or some of these other programs that we've seen have success this year. You've really only got the top three lines seeing the vast majority of the minutes in these high pressure games. So if you've got some of those fourth liners or guys that are getting cut constantly that probably deserved a starting spot somewhere else and just couldn't find one on a team that's got too much talent, yeah, they'll be going somewhere else eventually. But from the argument side that I'm on with you, for the record, I would like to see them get their shot faster somewhere else and not have that, wasted year of eligibility, sitting on a bench, quote unquote, rotting somewhere. So
right.
Maybe we'll see it, self-correct, just given that being one of the side effects of having such an influx of talent to some of those programs. but it's going to be a waiting game to see if it pans out that way or not. And in the meantime, maybe a program like North Dakota or somebody else, reaches out to all of their, alumni that's in the NHL or still playing professional hockey overseas or whatever, and say, hey, we would like to host. And I know that they do host a alumni golf tournament or whatever, but bring some of these recruits along to that alumni golf tournament. Have it be a whole weekend where you got 2 days out there, have the recruits on one day and just the alumni on the next, and say, hey, here are all of our, vast list of NHL talent that came out of here. Talk to them about their experience and why North Dakota is the place to play. And I'm sure that's been discussed, and it's really hard to get people on the same schedule, fully understand all of that. But I think there's going to be a lot more push for some of these universities that might not have the same money to rely on those types of events and personnel to maybe help them with the recruiting where they haven't reached out to them in the past as much.
Can't disagree with you on that, Max. We could spend hours on NAL and just the way that the whole landscape has changed. We'll save that for another episode. But I think that will wrap it up. Again, for everybody that has watched us on YouTube, who has listened to us on your favorite podcast app, we thank you for tuning in to MNCAA and specifically us here on the NCHC portion for the 2024-25 season. We're going to take a couple of weeks of much needed rest. We'll probably do another episode in probably a couple of weeks, but for now, for Max Veech, I'm Nick Maxson. Thank you for watching, as always, here to MNCAA here on the Sota Pod.